Hey, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
You know, oftentimes when we think about relationships, we think about relationship problems come up in relationship, right? And when you start working on those, people are like, oh, okay, you've got big problems. And today we want to talk about, instead of thinking about relationships in terms of when you think about them, it's a problem, thinking about them more proactively. We've invited two friends of ours to come on the show today, Raj and Gaby Sundra. They're a married couple. They have a website, Relationship Fun and Games. They're going to talk about how to find more information about that. But they're relationship experts, and they really focus on this idea of prevention, this idea of being proactive in your relationship. So Raj and Gaby, welcome. We're really excited you guys are on Personality Hacker today.
Thank you, guys. Happy to be here today.
Thanks for having us.
So unpack this idea, this notion of relationships, this idea of, you guys have this website, Relationship Fun and Games, this entire training program, this entire teaching method about making relationships proactive and fun. Kind of just give us a quick overview of that. Let us know what you do and why that's such a special thing.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks for asking and for having us on today. We really love love and we want to see more of it in the world. And there's just too many good relationships out there that people let go of because it gets difficult. But, you know, we look at it, even one individual and dealing with our own emotions and moods, and when we get hangry, you know, you're hungry and angry and all those things is challenging enough with one person. So we really want to encourage couples to look at their relationship in a new way. And often when people are dissecting the problems, then they get what I call stuck in the muck. And we wanted to flip it around and have people aim for what they wanted and being proactive. In fact, in our top level of our work, what we tell people is that we're supporting them and aiming for what we call a P3 relationship, a playful, peaceful, passionate relationship. But after we tell them that, we tell them there's a fourth P, and that's being proactive. Because we don't, you know, most relationship work out there, it dissects the problems, or someone says, well, we need to talk, and it's like, oh, gosh. And people then just, you know, it doesn't make it very fun. So we want to take the work out of relationship work and make it play. We like to say a little bit of intention, attention, and action spread out over time goes a very long way.
Okay.
Yeah, I loved what you said, Joel, about prevention and proactiveness as Gaby was talking about it, that somehow we grow up expecting relationships to just be simple, and if you find the right person, then you shouldn't have any problems. And so we face every problem that occurs in a relationship as there's something wrong, rather than it's an opportunity to grow and get more connected, more intimate, and transform ourselves in the process.
Now, I'm guessing that you guys, this is a hard won, like, perspective for you. I'm guessing you didn't just like get into a relationship and like everything's wonderful and you decided to teach this stuff because everything was going so well for you. It was probably a lot of lessons you learned. And I'd like to dig into maybe your personal story a little bit today. Like what prompted you? What was the, like, were there were like big challenges? Did you have some struggles early on that like, you're like, we got to get this handled. We got to figure this thing out. And you really shifted how you look at relationship because of that. Am I right on that perspective? Is that what happened for you?
Yeah, spot on. You know, there's always the initial attraction and the things that you are like so enamored with some new person that comes into your life. And, you know, we often find that if it's the right person, it's actually going to bring up a lot of stuff for you. And then there's this kind of conflict of like, but this person seems so right, but why is it so challenging in these areas? And
it should be easier. We hear that a lot. It shouldn't be this hard.
Yeah. And, you know, when there's a part of you that's saying this is right, and then there's all this stuff that is challenging, you look at it and you're like, well, is this just another one of those things that I give up on? You know, if you've been in a series of different relationships, you've probably noticed there's some patterns.
Should I tell them the story about our engagement party? So we'll just tell you two short stories here that show how far our relationship has come. And the first is that at our engagement party, we were pulled aside by one of our closest friends. And there we were, you know, it's a big night, we're excited. We thought we were being given a gift. And instead, this friend said to us, you know, I really don't think you guys should get married. It looks pretty messy from here, was what he said.
Wow.
Yeah, at our engagement party. And we were shocked and we thanked him, but he wasn't far off. Like, it really was messy. There was a lot of emotions, and our intuition was really strong that we were meant to be together as a couple. But our minds kept saying, you've got to be friggin' kidding me. We were so different. You know, you guys do so much great work on personalities, and we learned so much from you, about ourselves, and learned, you know, Raj is much more of an introvert, I'm much more of an extrovert. There were just so many differences that we had to get through. And the number one thing to get through was first realizing it wasn't a problem. The problem, it's one of my favorite sayings, the problem isn't the problem. The problem is you think the problem is a problem. Mm. The problem is actually the path. And so we took this problem of our friends saying, we don't think you should get married, and we just went to work. We went to play, really, and started looking for, what is working about our relationship? How do we really want it to be? And we created wedding vows, which we can tell you about, you know, the game we play there. We created what we call a shared relationship vision. So we have all of these tools and practices that we do that put in front of us, what do we say our relationship is about and who we want to be? And then we're always checking in, are we being that? Rather than waiting for some problem and something that we don't like that we need to push away from or run away from, or, you know, tell someone suppress their behavior. Instead, we want to find what is it that's shared together we're super excited about, and what do we do to make a game and make it fun for moving towards that. Mm. So just one piece to finish up that story. Raj, you want to jump forward in the future?
Fast forward, what was it, 3-4 years?
3-4 years, yeah, about that.
Some friends of ours, Brian Franklin and Genevieve Russell, we were in their wedding party, and we represented one of their, what was it, 5? Yeah, they had 5 values for their marriage, and they had 5 different couples each represent one of their values. And we represented devotion, and at the end of part of their 3-day wedding party, they had a seminar on being in relationship, and we were one of the couples in the wedding in that 5 panel. And on the way over, we just really quickly crafted what it was that we were going to say in like 15 minutes. Usually we're spending hours and hours preparing for the other kind of work we do, business consulting, and it was so easy. And when we started getting ready to get on stage, Brian came up to us and he's like, "Hey guys, can you shorten your time a little bit? You know, each person had 15 minutes, and we were the end of the day, so it was running late." Yeah, and Gaby totally was like, "No, we're taking our 15 minutes," and we got up there and we're sharing our things, and people loved it so much. They were laughing. In fact, people at the end of it said... But before that was Brian saying, yeah. Brian, the one who said, "Hey, can you do it in less than 15 minutes? When we finished and looked at him, he said, "Oh, tell him about the good and right, bad and wrong dance. Oh, tell him about this." And he knew all of our top tips. And he just everyone was loving it so much. And then, tell Raj what happened after. And at the end of it, our good friend... who is actually quite successful in business, he called us like 5 times. "You have to do this. You have to do this. This is a multi-million-dollar business. You have to do this. You've come so far. People need this. People need this." And this is the same guy that said earlier that you guys shouldn't get married. Yes, so, same person. So it was quite a interesting turn, and that's actually how we got into this work in the first place. We were just developing all these tools to have our relationship work. We weren't intending to make it something to offer to other people. We were actually called into it from our community. Yeah, this was out of demand, and it took from that time of us speaking the first time on relationship about 2 years for us to really get out there. But in those 2 years, we just were documenting everything that we did, and literally every, as I say, the problem isn't a problem, it's the path. Or as my friend Sasha Lala calls it now, she says, your mess is your message. So we're, if you have a problem, that's okay. We want you to, yes, address those, but we want there to be something bigger that couples are living into, as we mentioned, the vows or the shared relationship vision. Right, there's a formula that we use. We call it for a wildly successful life. Sometimes we put in the word sex there, wildly successful sex life, wildly successful relationship, whatever you want to fit in there. And that is to be able to hold the paradox of first, all is well. We're great. We're whole and complete. We might have some stresses and some challenges, but this is great. This is all is well. And at the same time, holding, the business idea of EBIs, even better ifs. So can you hold that all is well in your relationship and, like a kid saying, "I know, let's play a game." And you're up-leveling your relationship, so you're always playing this game of, "I got you, we're good where we're at, and let's take this to the next level." Just a different context for, quote-unquote, working on relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really interesting story because like that one of those that we worked together a few years ago was in a business consulting context. And so that's what I knew you guys as. And then I heard you guys were going to relationships. I was like, oh, it seemed like a natural fit, but I thought that was really fascinating. I hadn't heard your story that basically it was on demand. It was like, oh, I guess we could probably do this too. And wow. And it sounds like it was effortless. It sounds like if normally you put hours and hours into the consulting work that you had done, and then in 15 minutes you whipped up something quickly and it felt effortless. It sounds like you're heading the path you should be going. That I oftentimes use that feeling of effortlessness as a guiding star for the next thing that I would like to be doing. What feels right, what feels effortless. One thing you said, Raj, before that I just like mentally anchored and want to bring up again, if you could unpack this a little bit. You said the right person will bring up stuff for you. So meaning that if you see problems or challenges in your relationship, that's not necessarily a sign that you've got the wrong person.
It might be a good thing. I mean, that's a good thing, right?
Right. Like the right person is probably going to bring stuff up. Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, thanks for digging into that one a little bit. As I said it, this thought came to me that what would it be like if you just married yourself? Like, we might consider that easy. But what happens,
or not,
when you're married to someone or in relationship with somebody that I consider the right fit, they're actually quite different than you. And the beauty in that is that you get to become your greatest self by being with your partner, not just be comfortable with who you are in that moment. Gaby pushes pretty much every single one of my buttons in a way that moves me to my greater self. And, a lot of people are like, your relationship shouldn't be so challenging. And I'm like, but I want to have a great life. And, like, I can't think of anyone else I'd rather be with to get me there.
It's like we lean into challenges in so many areas of life, in business, in our health. You're like, oh, just stretch this much more. But then when it comes to our relationship, people are expecting easy, or they're searching for easy. And, again, I don't like, the term work. We really do. If you spread this out over time, if you bring that game spirit to it, hey, I know, let's try this. In fact, it's actually one of our tips recently is Raj, turning things into a game and saying, I know, let's play a game, when he wants to give me some feedback or criticism or make a request. But I wanted to add one thing to your answer there about
I just want to say a little bit, yeah.
Oh, is that what you're going to say?
Yeah.
Great.
So we came across in our early days of doing therapy before we got married, and people sometimes be like, why are we doing therapy before you get married? But it's awesome to handle things before you actually get married.
Yes, we're the proactive, right? We wanted to address the issues before we got married, not afterwards.
And we came across this modality of therapy called Imago. And
that's IMAGO, created by Harville Hendricks and Helen Hunt.
And one of their key messages is that you choose your partner to heal your unhealed wounds from the people that you were in relationship and cared for you in your formative years. And it's that romantic, committed relationship that is suited best to heal those wounds, because that's the person that you're most close with.
And just a little bit of refinement, you're actually not choosing the person to heal your wounds. You choose the person that is perfect for opening your unhealed wounds. They actually have zero skill for healing your wound. And, when Raj and I did the year of therapy, I didn't get this part of Imago. But years later, when we started doing relationship work and I started studying it again, I got this whole extra layer that if you embrace, when your partner does those things that trigger you and open up your unhealed wounds, if you embrace that it's your job to teach them how to heal your wounds, you're actually teaching them the skills that they need to be whole and complete. So, for example, I'm a little bit of a task-oriented badass, fairly masculine personality, and when I met Raj, he was a little bit more in his feminine and just emotional and would break down. And what would happen is I would get really, what they call father-child dynamic with him. He'd have a tough day, maybe a technology glitch or something. He'd slam his desk and yell, and my attitude would be like, get it together, damn it, you're ruining it for me, And then one day I realized, okay, I'm going to try this differently. This isn't helping. And I said, honey, why don't you come here and put your head in my lap? And I went to rub his hair and just asked him what was going on and was just really loving and compassionate with him. And he absolutely stopped the upsets. What he needed to heal was some love and tenderness. And what I needed to learn to be more integrated was more love and tenderness and softness. And those first 2 years of being together, people kept saying to me, you're so much softer, you're so much softer. Or they'd say to Raj, I don't know what you're doing, but just keep on doing it. So that very thing that you don't love about your partner is actually meant to be there for your transformation. And if you work with them, it'll be there for your healing, I should say. And if you work with them to teach them those skills, it's a very healing part of their transformation as well.
And it really is amazing the transformation that happens for both of you, and then in your relationship as you embrace this principle. And it totally flips the whole concept of relationship being easy on its head.
Yeah, you almost welcome the challenges. You say, this is great. Like this challenge is now giving me an opportunity to grow. Like this person I'm with that's challenging me in this way is a gift for me to know, like, my next growth path, really. That and there's things inside a relationship that you're challenged by that you would never be challenged by outside of a relationship, ever, right? I mean, I'm guessing that's come up for you guys. Like, you've had challenges now, and you're like, thank goodness for Raj, or thank goodness for Gaby. This happened with me with Antonia. I'm like, thank goodness for Antonia. I feel so challenged in this way, and I love it, and I wouldn't have been able to do this on my own.
And, who I love this new softer side of me, of who I am, and the response that I get from people, and the more intimate and vulnerable that people are with me over the years. And with Raj, now he holds this space of, I've got you, I've got this, I've got you. And he's so much more of this rock. And so now when he has a tough day or gets angry or gets flustered, it's a rarity. And I can go into this softness and, like, be there for him. But he's like, most of the time, he's like this, I've got you, this rock now. And I don't think that would have happened, me softening or him finding that core, uneffable with, attitude, if we didn't go through those challenges together.
Yeah, and then it propagates through all areas of your life, your business life, any hobbies you have in relationships with other people. The growth that you incur through your committed relationship then propagates into all areas of your life in a positive way. It's really amazing.
Okay.
And it is amazing how your relationship does impact so many areas of life because, Raj, for example, at work, he was rocking it at work, and I was rocking it at work, but we were really having a relationship that was so messy, our closest friends were advising us against it. But we started to take what are the business and personal development practices we can apply to relationship, and even what are the relationship practices we can apply to business. Because Raj still primarily works with companies with transformance, and we both work with couples, but I work directly with couples with relationship fun and games. Okay. So we're doing both, and it's amazing how much overlap there is between the two.
I bet. Okay, so we've kind of laid down a principled theory, or the abstract of what you guys talk about this idea of being proactive, about using relationship for personal growth. I want to get a little bit more specific. What is it in your relationship you guys have had some of the biggest conflict struggles around? Because somebody's listening right now. This, the person that can't talk, the fifth person in this conversation is listening, going, yeah, all that theory's great, but you don't know what my relationship's like. Like, I've got it bad. You guys probably got along pretty well. You didn't have any, like, knockout, drag-out, screaming matches. Somebody's a little upset here and there. But I'm guessing you guys have had some real, like, nitty-gritty real challenges that people can relate to. What are some of those challenges you've had, like actual things you had to deal with?
Yeah, I have a couple of challenges, to share with you, but just getting into the world of the people out there, I just wanted to mention that whenever we put content out there, we're always dividing it into 8 categories, 2 really, but then refined into a further 4.
Sure.
And that is, we always talk about, this was the advice we were given the day we got married, and it was great advice. All you need to know is keep the fights clean and the sex dirty. And in that moment, I thought to myself, save being nasty for your sex life, right? So you want to wear a halo when it comes to your arguing, and you want to wear your devil horns when it comes to getting it on. And then more specifically, it's, before sex or before a fight, as it just starts. So in sex, it's a seduction, and fighting, you just feel the tension building. During, right in the heat of it, and then after. And so if you're looking at those different places of where to apply, where to get your resources, because everyone's in a different place. When we look at arguments, we like to look at how long does it last, how bad does it get, and how often does it happen? And what you're really aiming for is to switch that so it's really that it happens rare, rare, and it's not extreme, and it doesn't last very long. But I'll give you one example of one of our difficult arguments that we've worked through, and then maybe, Raj, you have one?
Yeah.
He's looking at me like, I got one in mind. Sure.
Just one?
And let's see. I think one of the biggest ones that for me that we've gotten through, and I think I can guess which one Raj might say, but is, there's this dynamic that when we get stressed, even if it's external stress, that often we take it out on the person who's closest to us. And, Raj and I would have this dynamic, and he'd get really stressed. Again, it's most often either being hangry or a technology problem, if a computer's crashing or something like that. Those are our big triggers. But he'd look at me like he was angry at me with these evil eyes. And I'd say to him, I'm not your enemy. I'm not your enemy. And then we turned it around to saying it in as a positive as, I'm your number one fan. And so now when he gets stressed, I'll either tell him I'm your number one fan, or we recently just came up with another tip that when your partner's really stressed or hangry, and if maybe they're snapping at you, rather than turning to them and say, don't take it out on me, you can actually turn to them and just say, do you need some loving? And it is amazing. Raj and I just break into laughter, and the other day I was really in a bad space, and I said, yes, I need lots and lots and lots of loving. And just a great way to unhook from it. But I did want to say just top level, we can talk about some of the specifics, and we have all sorts of fun tips, like if you fight driving in the car, we've got a great tip. If your partner's about to tell you to do something and there's some nagging, you were just about to do it, we've got some great tips. But really it's the top level of being proactive about saying what you want. So Raj, you had a problem?
Along those lines of being proactive in saying what you want, I'll give a little backstory. As Gaby mentioned, she's more, what's the way to say it?
She's a force to be reckoned with, Raj. She's a force to be reckoned with. That's the words you're looking for.
Exactly.
And I say that with love, Gaby.
Yeah.
And, as I grew to know her family more and more, I could see where that came from. Her dad was a high-powered litigator, and, she had to learn to fend for herself. And so, my family was much more quiet and reserved in expressing their wants and needs, and I also grew up much more of an introvert, kind of on my own. And one of the big challenges with Gaby and I is that she is way more expressive in what she wants, and I would consider that dominating because I never lived life that way of just saying what I wanted. And this is related to that, her being my enemy, because I always felt like I was being dominated and that I had to fight for what I wanted. And so that was kind of my frame. That was kind of the problem. What I learned over time, and that was a big one, and guys or women, both on either side of that equation, might relate. There's usually a more dominant person and then the less dominant person in the relationship. And it gets complicated.
Yeah, they call it the hurricane and the turtle.
Hurricane and the
right?
turtle.
Yeah, that's Harville and Helen's, the hurricane and the turtle, right? One pulls their head in, isn't as expressive. The other is just out there with all their expression. Yeah.
And that created a lot of problems on a day-to-day basis, from anything from what do you want to eat to what are we going to do tonight?
Are we going to go away for the weekend to that wedding, or do we want to stay home and just have a quiet weekend at home? That could turn into something big.
Yeah, so any one issue like that, like this, polarity issue or whatever, over time it accumulates and accumulates, and you build up all this tension around it, and that's kind of how this, you're my enemy thing, it was one of the contributors to that. I like to say that it's kind of like plaque. It builds up over time, and if you don't deal with it on an ongoing basis, you create this big story about your partner, and then you just live into that story. What's transitioned from that being kind of what the stage was set as early on in our relationship is I really saw that I have no idea or skill how to communicate my needs and wants, because I just didn't do that growing up. And I translated my inability to communicate what I want into that Gaby's a dominating force to be reckoned with and piss me off, And
can you tell them about the ogre bitch?
I'll tell about that in a second. So what I found is like I mentioned earlier, the things that you transform in your relationship propagate into all areas of your life. So it's like this double bonus. I'm just learning to express what I want, and people are like, okay. And I'm like, really? And now Gabby does the same thing. For a while, I realized how uncomfortable I was when she said, well, what do you want to do? And I'd be like, I don't know. You know? But now I'll be like, hey, Gabby, I have this plan. Let's do this. And she's like, okay. And that was a huge growth curve for us. We're still working on it, but I think that kind of shows an initial dynamic in relationship where she's helped me grow, I've actually helped her grow, and it's translated into other areas of our lives as well. I'm a much better business consultant now. I'm a much better friend, contributor, etc. Because I've learned how to express my needs and wants in an effective way, and in that I can also honor other people's wants without feeling dominated.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much that the relationship that Joel and I have has illustrated to me how, like, when I'm experiencing a lack in myself, how easy it is to project that onto the other person. How easy it is to go, well, you're just being, and then fill in the blank, when really it's, well, I'm not stepping up the way that I want to be stepping up. But that reframe is really, really difficult because you got all that ego in there. And it's not just like the ego you're contending with on your own. Like, your mate is mirroring back your ego so clearly. And it's very difficult to get past the, like, wanting to show up as, I think we all want to show up as our best self for our mates. We don't want that tarnished. And I think the major fear is that if we show up somehow tarnished, then that's going to create a rift between, me and you. You're not going to be able to forgive me or respect me or whatever. And so we hold on to that ego so tightly, and we double down on being right, or we double down on the other guy being the bad guy. So I think that reframe.
I'm glad you brought up being right.
Yeah.
We have a wedding vow, and we mentioned our vows practices because, we can deal with the problems, as we said, but it's if you have the practices and the habits in place, your problems, quote unquote problems, they don't even have a shot of getting that big. In fact, Raj and I were always looking for how can we lower the threshold for what constitute nastiness. If it's just a tinge in your voice, not even something really direct, but, for some people, they have to get all the way to name calling before they go, oh, wow, we're being too nasty. So you want to have, what we call peace practices. We have play practices, peace practices, and passion practices. But you want to have these things in place. And so we have one of our wedding vows is I promise to get off it first, and being on it is like, we're upset, we're blaming,
like you said, being right.
Being right. Okay, so I promise to get off it first and give, especially when it's difficult. No, it's the full vow is I promise to breathe deep, get off it first, and give, especially when it's difficult. So your argument no longer is about who's right or who's wrong or who's had a worse day. It's about none of that. But you've promised that I'm going to be the first person to step forward. You're not waiting for it to be fair or for your mood. You're living off of your habits and your promises.
So do you guys proactively, like when you're not in the midst of a disagreement, and is this what you teach? You teach practicing this like just in a daily habit almost, like you practice some of the methods so that because when you're in the midst of a fight or a disagreement, you start to lose clarity. Like your ego, like for me, my ego comes up. I have my will. I want something my way, or I'm disappointed or upset about something. I have less I can't really see the trees for the forest at that point. I'm caught up in the emotion of it. And I'm guessing that the proactive element comes from like practicing mechanisms. When you get to that point, you rely on these disciplines you've practiced over time before you get to the place of being upset. Is that kind of what you're talking about? Like, is that the stuff that you teach, basically?
Yeah, we both have something to say. We've been back and forth.
Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to point out that what you're speaking about is more in an emotional term, but really there's a ton of brain chemistry going on there.
Sure.
And when you're upset, you literally cannot think. You're using your lower brain, your reaction brain, your oldest part of your brain, the fight or flight, your amygdala. And what you want to be using is your frontal cortex, your compassion, your empathy, which is the latest part of us as humans to evolve. So it's not anywhere near as developed. And the only way to do that is to acknowledge that, one, the amygdala is almost always in control, and two, you have to really, really bring in your frontal lobe. Okay, go ahead, Raj. Sorry. I just want to get that brain science part in there because it's so, so important.
Yeah, I was also going to point out, Joel, that it's challenging to use tools when you're in the midst of it, because, like Gabby said, you can't even think straight. And if you look at the way Gabby described our content earlier, we have an as it starts and during category for both Fights Clean and Sex Dirty. But in the Fights Clean, as it starts, you're just starting to notice the emotional hijack from your triggers, and there's tools specific to that phase of fighting to help you get out of it. It's almost like someone's throwing you a lifeline, a life preserver. And I'm often like, thank God I have that tool, because our whole weekend would have been ruined if I didn't.
Yeah, we even had a 20-minute fight on Christmas morning that was like rare for us. It's one little thing that was triggered, and it was the tough day. And that could have been ruined our whole Christmas day, but instead it was a 20-minute interaction. We went deep, and then we got out, got our value, got out of there.
You went real deep, real quick, and especially on a holiday, your things get blown out of proportion, and so the way we've designed our work really focuses on, like, we like to say that our tools are very applicable, not theoretical, because you can use one in any moment, and that's how we come up with them. We're like, how do we get out of this thing right now, or how do we use this problem to spur our growth and development? And we come up with some tool, and then that's what we start teaching.
Should we tell them about the hot and bothered backseat driver?
Sure.
Since that one came up on the spot. I don't know
sure.
how much time we have. You guys want to hear one of these tips?
We're good.
And how it evolved? Yeah, so the story of how this one evolved, couples can relate. You're driving on the freeway, and, who knows, maybe you don't like how your partner drives. Maybe it's too fast, too slow, too close to the next car. In our case, Raj is a total dreamer and visionary. He's always thinking, what if? But he likes to drive, and I like it if he drives. But often on road trips, he'll miss the exit. I'll tell him, hey, the exit's coming up in a few miles. But he's so, like, envisioning this amazing future, it just totally loses his radar in, like, 30 seconds. So one day I look up, and he's about to miss the exit, and I just snapped at him. I was like, you're about to miss the exit again! That was probably the nice version. And he looked at me, and instead of snapping at me, instead of his amygdala taking over and him going, you're not being very nice, and I'm just not, whatever it may be, instead he looked at me and he said, can I get a do-over?
Which is one of our other
tips. Ask for a do-over if you don't like how they said it. And I thought, okay, if in my nastiness he can be that calm to ask me for a do-over, then I'm gonna meet him there. And so this is a great thing about being the first person. If you keep doing that, eventually your partner does want to meet you there. So, like John Gottman, the relationship researcher, says, don't be afraid to love more and love first. That totally applies here, and Raj is really good at that. But at any rate, so when he asked me that, I thought, okay, I'm really bothered right now. What can I do? I'm going to be hot and bothered instead. And I said, oh, Raj, I want this exit. Yes, take this exit now, yes! And I just went off.
And we both started laughing instead of being really irritated with each other.
And I got a different kind of rise out of him, if you know what I mean. And that is not the kind of tip that you ever forget. And every time I might get bothered in the car now, I instantly just shift into being hot and bothered. And we smile and we laugh and we even have a little sexy moment, as opposed to this devolving ping pong that leaves us tense and fighting. And so you show up at, God forbid, your in-laws' house, and you can't even go inside because you're still fighting in the car out front.
Which has probably happened to every couple on the planet at some point.
Yeah.
So I this is worth the price of admission, that little tip right there. This idea that you can shift how you interpret things, the narrative around whatever's happening on a dime. It's really, we're in power of that. Like you Gabby, were in control of the ability to say, I'm going to be sexy about this and be hot and bothered instead of just bothered and being nasty. And that's what an amazing ability as a person, especially with the person you're in love with and you're with in a relationship, to be able to do that on a dime. That's incredible.
Well, and also Raj's ability to hold space.
Yes.
In that moment and
trigger her toward that.
Yeah, exactly. I think that those are fantastic. One thing you mentioned, I'm just going to go back just a little bit to something you said. I can't remember who said it, Raj or Gabby, but effectively you talked about deciding what is an acceptable amount of nastiness. It made me think immediately of sort of calibrating a thermostat to make it so that we have lower thresholds for how we're allowing ourselves to talk to each other. As in, like, what is an acceptable level of nastiness? And I bet how our nastiness thermostats are calibrated, really, like, we'll allow each other to get away with all sorts of stuff that is super toxic in a relationship if we just haven't attended to that nastiness thermostat, right? Like, we're allowing, like you said, some couples allow themselves to get to the point of like name calling. And my suspicion is that your recommendation is to make it so that the acceptable amount of nastiness is way lower than that. And so it's like a line you won't cross. I thought that was such a great suggestion, is to just take a moment to look at what amount of toxicity between us, what amount of nastiness, what amount of, hostility, how much are we deciding is an acceptable amount, as opposed to just letting the emotion determine that in the moment.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'll answer one element of that, and then Gabby will chime in. I love that concept of what did you say, a nastiness thermostat?
Yeah.
What came to me on that one is that our nastiness thermostat has naturally lowered in temperature over time by using our tools. As you were speaking, I was like, yeah, our upsets used to you get triggered in 5 seconds and then it would ruin an entire day. And now our tolerance is like a 10-minute upset. And unless there's some big, deep wound that we need to really dig into and resolve and like that. But our thermostat has naturally I don't know if you want to say lowered or increased, but it's through this proactiveness that your relationship starts moving in the direction that you want it to, and then you can both be proactive about saying what the limits are, and Gabby's going to talk about that, I think, and it just naturally starts happening by using the tools, which is a really beautiful thing.
Because the part that you're talking about, that nastiness, that's somewhere between the as it starts and the during. And I mentioned earlier that when it comes to arguments, we ask people to look at 3 areas. How often is this argument happening? How bad or how extreme does it get, and how long does it last? And in this case, you're talking about that threshold is, how extreme is it? Are you name calling? In some, horrible cases, there's even violence. Even solid couples, things can get pretty heated at times. So you're always looking like, where is that? How bad does it get? And then you might just consider you said draw a line in the sand. So do it, even physically, draw a line in the sand, using your arm, even figuratively or literally, or even sketch out a doodle on a piece of paper, but agree between you, what's the line in the sand? Okay, well, we're not going to push and shove. Okay, well, we're not going to call names. Okay, well, we're not going to swear. All right, and then Raj and I have gotten it all the way to where we've agreed, because the number 2 reason that a relationship fails is negativity. It's not big issues, it's negativity. And negativity is defined as blaming, shaming, complaining, and criticizing. So for Raj and I, the threshold that we're practicing right now is no blame, shame, complain, or criticizing. And if we do blame, shame, or criticize, what we do is, they tell you don't be negative. Well, we get hungry, we get cranky, we get all sorts of things happen. And so we are going to get negative and blame, shame, and complain sometimes. So we brought in then John Gottman's magic ratio. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of his magic ratio, but after 30 years of research, he's discovered that couples need a 5-to-1 ratio of 5 positive experiences for every 1 negative experience. So the way that we actually have been working on our threshold to lower it so that we're not blaming, shaming, and complaining is every time we do, we call ourselves out or we gently call our partner out. And when I say call them out, it's like we're catching them, but not like, aha. It's like, whoopsie daisy, you're about to fall, or I'm about to fall. Catching yourself is even better. And then we'll say 5 positive things about the very thing that we just blamed, shamed, or complained about. Now, if you do the full 5, you'll notice the first 2, the person kind of comes back to restored, almost to where you were in the beginning. But if you go to 4 and 5, you actually have more intimacy than when you started. So instead of something devolving and getting worse and worse and worse, if you keep drawing these lines and saying, okay, we're not going to cross this line, and then you get that one down pat, okay, now we're not going to cross this line, and even all the way down to this negativity and bringing in the drama, we call it the drama-free diet, but applying the magic ratio, that in itself will completely alter your relationship, completely. Just start measuring where do your low blows start, and keep making those being at a higher standard, a higher standard, a higher standard. And even if your partner doesn't want to play that game, you can play that game. And over time, really, your behavior does start to change other people's behaviors.
That's such a powerful tool because, well, first of all, I love the idea that it's incremental, because I think that when I can just imagine talking to my spouse and going, okay, here's a line in the sand. This is the nastiness level that we will not cross. And then in the very next fight, like crossing it, like, by yards, and going, oh, well, I guess my ideals around this are not matching the reality of the situation. So then when you see the discrepancy between the two of like what you would like your the calibration to be set out, but the reality of it, then not just jumping to that idealization, but incrementally going, okay, let's draw the line a little bit closer and a little bit closer. And then implementing like the tool that you just mentioned, which is, well, now I have to say those 5 positive things. And
you might need training wheels for a while,
exactly.
Right? There's a lot of different things you can do for training wheels. Or like imagine, when you go bowling the first time or with the kids and they put out the bumpers, on the sides.
Exactly.
So that, you can have some support. And that's those habits that we were talking about. So it's not just that you're looking at how do you deal with an argument. Those are really important skills to learn. But what do you do in the before? Remember we said before as it starts, during, and after. What do you do in the before and the after to nurture that tenderness so that, calling your partner an effing this or that just doesn't feel good to you. You just don't even want to go there. Yeah. That's the real important thing. Like these vows we say to each other every day. One of our other wedding vows, we have the vow of the month. And so we say the vow of the month every day at breakfast to each other. Not quite every day, but most days. And saying that vow of the month just has us then focus on one vow every month, and we get really good at that one. And we go through it, and of course all 12 each year, so that we're not just forgetting about our vows, but we're living into them on a regular basis, and they keep us from getting into those ugly places where we have to start using all of our tools on how to get out of an argument in it. The best way to get out of an argument is don't get into it in the first place.
Yeah. Gaby, I want to unpack a little bit more on these vows. This sounds like a really interesting concept. Before we do that, I know, so you're listening to this show, right? You, the listener. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, this sounds all fine and good, Raj and Gaby and Joel and Antonia, because, you guys are all committed with each other to work on your relationships. But I'm sitting here listening, and my spouse, my partner, my lover, they're not invested like I am in personal growth and wanting to grow a relationship. I'm alone in this. I'm listening to this podcast alone. They won't listen to this with me. They're not, like, I'm on my own. And I kind of am dismissing what you're saying, because how can any of this apply if they're not willing to play along too? Can you speak to that just for a minute or so? What would you say to the person listening that says, my partner's not in this with me? How can I even make any change in my relationship for the better?
Do it anyways, is what I say. It really does take one to tango. It doesn't take two in this case. And for me, it's about character. And I'm not going to have my character and my behavior based on what somebody else is doing. So someone can come and, say something hateful or, ridiculous, and I'm not going to be hateful or ridiculous just because they are. Someone might be apathetic. I'm not going to use their apathy as an excuse for me to be apathetic. I'm going to choose my character and my behavior based on my values, my beliefs, and my dreams. I'm going to stay forward focused and do everything in my power, and then inspire my partner saying, hey, you want to play a game? And if they say no, then it's like, okay, I'll play by myself. All right, I'm going to play this game. And you keep playing until you can inspire your partner to join in. Now, obviously, there's extreme cases, and I was just watching this TED Talk yesterday on the longest study on happiness, a 75-year study on happiness, and they determined their number one is they said relationships, happy relationships are key, and that loneliness and conflict are toxic, and they were actually even making a case for divorce and saying that, your mental decline, especially if you're, in your 60s, 70s, 80s, your mental decline, so many things are factors of the quality of your relationship. So on the one hand, I say don't wait for your partner, get started. 9 times out of 10, it might take a while, but 9 times out of 10, they're going to take baby steps, and your changing will impact them changing. And there might be some extreme cases where it's just a very toxic relationship. There's not much that you can do, and you might want to consider your long-term emotional safety in that case and make some other changes.
That is one of the best answers I've ever had to what do you do if you're in one-sided. Like, I think that's the reframe is, look, it's at that point, it's about you being the person you want to be, regardless of whatever context you're in, whether it's relationship, family, business. It's about you growing. And I love how you frame that. I think that's a great frame, Gaby. So
Thank you. I often try to think of Martin Luther King, if someone came up to him and was just, saying all of these nasty things, he's not going to turn around and punch him, right? That's the whole thing. It's my behavior based on my values, not my, because that's the amygdala. Everything else is the reaction. And what we're really fundamentally trying to do is extend the time between the amygdala reaction in your lower brain and your frontal lobe saying, no, this is actually what I want, and this is the smartest way to get there. That's really what we're talking about.
Yeah. You guys have a great way that you put your vows together, your wedding vows. And I don't really want to give it away because I want you to talk about it, but I just know that we wanted to begin kind of the wrap-up part of this podcast in closing with that. Do you have one more thing to say, Antonia? You were making motions toward me.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, they already kind of hinted at this. Gabby talked about, the vow of the month and reading it or like reciting it at breakfast.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And I think that kind of probably piqued someone's interest listening, and I want to dig more into that, but I didn't want to precede that. I really want it to come from you guys. So give us a little bit more context. Give us a little more framework about the vow of the month. What do you mean by vow of the month? Does this come from your wedding? Like, how does this all work? And how have you guys gone to approach this? I think it's a great framework to come from.
Well, most people that are married that I know have wedding vows, and this kind of happened in my recollection spontaneously. We were independently creating our vows, and there's always that pressure. What are the vows that we want to live by? And you're approaching your wedding date, and you're like, oh, these aren't good enough, and whatever, all that stuff, right? And somehow when we were narrowing down our list, there turned out to be 12 of them. And Gaby's like, well, why don't we just have one per month? And we'll live by one each month, and it will be a great container to actually keep our vows alive and present in our marriage and use them as a guideline for how we want to be in marriage together.
Yeah, because I've asked friends before, when my friends that are married are having problems, challenges, opportunities, I'll call them, the first question I ask them is, what did you promise? Because I don't want to project my own values or what works for me. We work with a wide variety of couples, from all sorts of different, forms for a relationship. And so I always want to find out, well, what's important to you and your partner? What did you promise? And I'll ask them about their vows. And 9 times out of 10, they're like, oh, I don't know. They don't know what they promised. But here's this solemn, huge thing. You're standing up in front of all these people. And in fact, when Raj and I got married, we turned to our guests. And Raj did this spontaneously. He said, let's read them together. So we didn't say our wedding vows to each other. We said them simultaneously to our guests. And we asked them, we actually gave them all a copy of the vows, and we printed at the bottom and said, these are the touchstones that we promise, and we commit to coming back to again and again. And we request, if you see us being anything outside of these values, we actually want you to say something to us. So now that we say the wedding vow of the month, and in fact we're starting to learn which vows are which month. You're like, ooh, August is a real doozy. That one's tough. We have one, I promise to love your loved ones as my own. And so I don't know if the family has started to notice that we kick up our intimacy with our spouse's family during a certain month of the year. But it just is such a great frame, because whether we're focusing on that vow of the month or just the fact that we're saying a vow during the day can just be so grounding and aligning for us and just remind us of what we're up to.
Yeah.
Now, you might have people that aren't married and they don't have vows, or maybe you're married and you don't like your vows or you don't even remember your vows. You can go ahead and redo them, or you can do this exercise, and I'll give you the link so you guys can include it in this recording. But a couple of weeks ago, I wrote a blog called The Shared Relationship Vision, and it's an exercise that can do 2 really awesome things. One, you create a vision for your relationship, individually first and then together collectively, so that you have an agreement of, yes, this is what we want. This is what's most important to us in our relationship, and we both agree that we want that. And then you can set some goals around it by saying, okay, what are the things that are most important to me? You each choose. And what are the most difficult? And what we do is we create 90-day games. We create goals around those areas, and we do that 3 times a year. But even more than that, you can take a top-level view of your whole list of this shared relationship vision you've described and condense it into a short paragraph. And so Raj and I, we actually say our shared relationship vision to each other, again, most every day at one of our meals. and we make eye contact, and it's now memorized for us. And can we share our shared relationship vision with you here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Ready, Raj?
Sure.
I love my marriage and my husband.
My marriage and my wife.
We are playful, peaceful, and passionate. We are hot for each other and express it daily. We generate with intention, and we communicate with care. We seek to understand, spot, and meet each other's needs and delights. We contribute to the world, we're on top of what is to be done, and are abundant with our finances, time, energy, and love. And so then we can just listen in and go, okay, we're hot for each other and express it daily. We're like, it's actually been a few days, since we've done that. Maybe we should get that on.
Yeah.
And so instead of like waiting and going, oh gosh, it's been 2 weeks and we haven't had sex, we're saying this regularly to each other. Oh, we're hot for each other and we express it daily. People want to be, that closed loop. People want that closed loop. So if you say something is true and it's not true, you're naturally moving towards that. Like, oh, yes, we do want that. Yes, let's make that happen. And it's just a totally different focus.
And one of the things I'll just add about both the vows and the relationship vision, the shared relationship vision, is as human beings, we have this amazingly unique quality of creating our world through our words. Like, what is it that I want in my life? Articulate that and then actually make that happen. We have that ability. We forget that often because we've probably tried it and we've failed sometimes in our past. But we really do have the ability to create our world through our words. And if you're proactive, this is like the foundation of being proactive is like, how do you want it to be? Articulate that in words, and then to true yourself up to that time and time and time again, and transform, bring play to the things that are not living into exactly how you're wanting it to be, and over time you'll actually get there.
Because the way it normally goes, what people normally do is there's the world out there happening. Their partner came home cranky and angry and snapped at them when they didn't deserve it. And so then that gives them their words, what they talk about. They might either snap back at them or they go and, complain to their friend or whatever it may be. But what's happening to them is what's dictating what's coming out of their mouth, as opposed to those that take what's coming out of their mouth and have that dictate what's happening around them.
And that's just such a clear delineation of being proactive or proactiveness versus reactiveness.
Yeah. Guys, this is really good stuff. How do people find you if they want to get more information on what you do, on the services you offer, the programs that are coming up? Where would they find you online?
Great. Well, you can find out all of our information at relationshipfunandgames.com. Again, we're trying to make this fun, not work here. And there you'll find a link also. We have a weekly TV show. It's an online show, a hangout called How to Keep the Fights Clean and the Sex Dirty, called Fights Clean, Sex Dirty TV. And we have an interview, a guest, usually a couple, not always, but usually a couple. And those are on Wednesday nights at 5:30. And then right now, for the next few weeks, we have a webinar, the number one reason that relationships fail and what you can do about it, and that's also on our website.
Okay.
And that's all leading towards on February 18th, just in time for Valentine's Day, right afterwards. If you want to give your beloved this gift or ask them on Valentine's Day to do this with you as a gift, we'll be starting February 18th, a course that's all about 6 weeks online on how to turn conflict and complaint into contentment and connection. So we want to take all that tension, tame it, melt it, and really have people more connected than ever.
Very cool. And of course, underneath this podcast and the podcast notes on our website will be a link to Raj and Gaby's website, and you can find about all the stuff that they're doing that Gaby just mentioned. You can find it at the link underneath this podcast in the podcast notes.
Yeah.
And I will just mention that right now, if someone does subscribe to the list of all of our free tips, and we only send a limited number of emails per week out, we send out a weekly WhatsApp of all the things that are happening during the week, and then a weekly wrap-up at the end of the week. So you won't miss out on anything, but you won't be bombarded with emails. But we have a quick start kit right now. We call it the Relationship Reset Quick Start Kit. So if you opt in, there's all sorts of free goodies you'll get right now, including a summary of our ebook and all sorts of things that will have some great tips you can apply instantly. So go ahead and check that out, and let us know what you want, because we're always creating new content, and it's great to hear from couples with what they're challenged by, and even your great tips. How are you playing in relationship? and making things even better. That even better if plus all is well, that wildly successful relationship. We want to hear from you.
Raj and Gaby, this has been a pleasure to have you on the Personality Hacker Show. We are very excited. The stuff you're teaching about proactivity, about thinking in terms of personal growth in the framework of relationship. I can't imagine the world. I mean, this is so exciting you're bringing this to the world, because the world needs this kind of stuff. The world needs to think about relationship in a proactive way. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for your work. Thank you for being willing to come onto the show and talk about what you guys do. We really do appreciate you being here and being present today with this whole conversation.
Thank you so much, Joel and Antonia. We really enjoyed the show, and we look forward to seeing some of the listeners in our work moving forward.
Yes, the world needs more love, and so here's to all of you listeners with a playful, peaceful, passionate relationship. We're here to support you. And Joel and Antonia, you have so supported us in our relationship. We've learned so much from Personality Hacker. Thanks for everything that you're doing that applies to relationships, to business, to all areas of life and self-awareness. We love your work.
Thank you. So this has been the Personality Hacker Podcast. If you'd like to find out more information about what we do, you can find out all that information over at personalityhacker.com. You can also join our community of like minds. It's a growing community of people just like you that are joining in conversation around personal development. And you can find that over at facebook.com/personalityhacker or on twitter.com/personalityhack.
If you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe to it on iTunes and various Android platforms. And if you are feeling a sense of reciprocity and would like to leave a rating and review on iTunes, that helps us out a lot. It encourages iTunes to rate us higher. It puts us in their algorithm to recommend us cross-pollinate to other podcasts. So if you are in a giving mood, leaving a rating and review on iTunes would be lovely.
Yeah. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
Thanks for being with us on the Personality Hacker Podcast. We'll talk with you on the next episode.